The upcoming U.S. elections will be a turning point in American history, one with global ramifications. What will be the impact on the issues of race, public health, and foreign policy if Joe Biden wins the upcoming U.S. election?
Well, Biden victory will certainly be nothing like a Trump victory on the race question. He has not adopted such language as divisive as Mr. Trump. He has explicitly made the racial question sort of a key element of his campaign in a positive sense, that is. Certainly the fact that he has with him someone running as his VP that is from diversity, as they say, a woman of African American, Indian heritage. It's also a message that he's sending, and he's had all of these town hall meetings where the question has been raised. However, one would be naive to think that a Biden election would solve the problem of racism in the United States. The man himself has a checkered past when it comes to that. He has dealt with these issues with some people from the segregation era with whom he was cozy at times. He was criticized for that, including by his current choice as vice president during the early debates. So that makes the man half convincing for a lot of the people. But giving him the credit that he has made a choice to move forward on that particular messaging about this, it will certainly be something different when it comes to that. But again, the deeper question is that the election is just one moment in the history of the United States. What we have built up now is tension as bad as what we had in the late 60s, early 70s, really. I mean, just look at how the violence is building up, the militias, the tension in the cities. So that's going to take a lot more than a commission or a report to do that, or investing in the neighborhoods, as he has this commission that he's launching the idea of. I think it's going to call for a sort of a long period in which the systemic nature of the racism in the United States need to be dealt by the candidate that, if he wins, he will be.
Traditionally, the Democrats have been much more concerned about public health and access to health care than the Republicans. And so I would expect that if Biden is elected, there would be certainly an effort to shore up the Affordable Care Act to, in fact, expand access to health insurance for millions of Americans who are actually still not covered. And there has been a definite shift in the party to the left, I would say, on issues of healthcare coverage. And on the issue of the coronavirus pandemic, I think President Biden would have a very, very tough task. I mean, there's a point at which, the virus has become so widespread, so deeply entrenched in some ways already in the population that it's not going to be easy just to turn something around. So I do think that he has expressed much more respect for science, for evidence, for the traditional independent expertise and authority of the Centers for Disease Control, for example, or the National Institutes of Health. He has been, I think, more willing to let the scientists drive the response than what we've seen under the current administration. But it will not be easy to turn the ship around because the epidemic has been burning for so long. When we look at the international level, we have heard, I think, encouraging messages from the Democratic Party regarding its willingness, for example, to make sure that vaccines that are manufactured would be shared globally, would be made more widely available. So much more of an outward-looking governing philosophy and platform than, of course, the Trump administration, and that he would overturn or change the decision, basically, regarding withdrawal from WHO. Again, I think there's been a lot of damage done to the U.S. public reputation coordination at the international level. I think the influence of the U.S., even with the Biden election, will not be what it was 4 years ago. And the amount of money that the U.S. is willing to contribute to international efforts to address the pandemic remains unclear. Of course, this depends on the economy and Congress. But overall, I think we can expect a much more cooperative administration that is willing to play ball with other partners to try to get this pandemic under control.
General impact would probably be that you would see the deceleration of the types of negative direction in many of the relationships that the United States has had. There would be, I think, a sort of trying to go back to what was there before, i.e. the Obama years, and the United States playing a more meaningful role in all kinds of multilateral efforts. COVID-19, this could be, I think, one obvious field in which a Biden administration would play a very, very different role than a second Trump administration is likely to do. There wouldn't be sort of vaccine nationalism, but rather vaccine sort of globalism and so forth. I think that would be something the Biden administration would certainly do. I think European allies, NATO allies, would be reassured that, okay, there's a semblance of normality. And I think, I'm not sure, probably the conflict, the competition with China would, some of the worst edges and insults and so forth that we hear would probably disappear, but I think that it's not going to change the basic structure and the structural concerns that the United States and as well as Europe in some extent has with the growing economic power of China. I think probably one of the main differences you'd probably see with Biden is United States' position vis-a-vis Russia. And that's where I think that's where you would be likely to see the sort of strong trend towards restoring the NATO alliances as a fully functioning organization, because it's hard to see how a Biden administration would simply overlook some of the negative things that we have heard about Russian policy, about President Putin's approach vis-a-vis domestic opponents, as we've seen very recently, the reports about poisoning and so forth. So, policy in the Ukraine, etc., etc. So I think you would see an attempt to at least in the Biden administration, to much more clearly sort of stand up to Russia, and that would probably be fairly popular certainly among the European Union countries. By and large. So there you would see the same. Not everything would change. I mean, I think even in the Biden administration, there's not going to be the sort of going back to things, some kind of a normal that was there 20, 30 years ago. That's highly unlikely. Things are changing. U.S. foreign policy is there to serve the United States interests. And of course, the two presidential candidates see those interests somewhat differently. But it's not that those interests would be in a Biden administration become less important, but the tools by which a Biden administration would push U.S. interests would be, I think, very different.
As we celebrate tonight here in Columbia, especially those who love their country. This is the moment to choose the